Hello, are we back?
Yeah, you're back.
All right. So I'm gonna remute up. I'm sorry, Mar. We lost like maybe about 30 seconds.
Okay, what was the last thing you heard?
Uh, I did not have my headphones in for that for when it started, so I'm not sure. So maybe go about like maybe a
The
paragraph or two
alliance.
back. The
And
what?
we're working together.
Working together in an alliance.
Hoping he did. Hoping. Working together and
Okay,
hoping Percy knew something.
Okay.
okay, yeah, I see now.
Sorry about that.
Alright, let's try again. When you came, I was hoping. I mean, Athena can get along with just about anybody, except for Ares. And of course, she's got that rivalry with Poseidon. But I mean, aside from that, I thought we could work together. I thought you might know something. I shook my head. I wished I could help her, but I felt too hungry and tired and mentally overloaded to ask any more questions. I've got to get a quest, Annabeth muttered to herself. I'm not too young. They would just tell me the problem. I could smell barbecue smoke coming from somewhere nearby. Annabeth must have heard my stomach growl. She told me to go on. She'd catch me later. I left her on the pier, tracing her finger across the rail as if drawing a battle plan. Back at cabin 11, everybody was talking and horsing around, waiting for dinner. For the first time, I noticed that a lot of the campers had similar features. Sharp noses, upturned eyebrows, mischievous smiles. They were the kinds of kids that teachers would peg as troublemakers. Thankfully, nobody paid much attention to me as I walked over to my spot and plopped down with my minotaur horn. Counselor, Luke, came over. He had the Hermes family resemblance, too. It was marred by that scar on his right cheek, but his smile was intact. Found you a sleeping bag, he said. And here, I'll stole you some toiletries from the camp store. I couldn't tell if he was kidding about the stealing part. I said, thanks. No problem. Luke sat next to me, pushed his back against the wall. Tough first day? I don't belong here, I said. I don't even believe in gods. Yeah, he said. That's how we all started. Once you start believing in them, it doesn't get any easier. The bitterness in his voice surprised me, because Luke seemed like a pretty easygoing guy. He looked like he could handle just about anything. So, your dad is Hermes? I asked. He pulled a switchblade out of his back pocket, and for a second I thought he was going to gut me, but he just scraped the mud off the sole of his sandal. Yeah, Hermes. The wing-footed messenger guy. That's him. Messengers, medicine, travelers, merchants, thieves, anybody who uses the roads. That's why you're here, enjoying Cabin 11's hospitality. Hermes isn't picky about who he sponsors. I figured Luke didn't mean to call me a nobody. He just had a lot on his mind. You ever meet your dad? I asked. Once. I waited, thinking that if he wanted to tell me, he'd tell me. Apparently, he didn't. I wondered if the story had anything to do with how he got his scar. Luke looked up and managed a smile. Don't worry about it, Percy. The campers here, they're mostly good people. After all, we're extended family, right? We take care of each other. He seemed to understand how lost I felt, and I was grateful for that. Because an older guy like him, even if he was a counselor, should have steered clear of an uncool middle schooler like me. But Luke had welcomed me into the cabin. He'd even stolen me some toiletries, which was the nicest thing anybody had done for me all day. I decided to ask him my last big question, the one that had been bothering me all afternoon. Clarice, from Aries, was joking about me being Big 3 material, and then Annabeth, twice she said I might be the one. She said I should talk to the Oracle. What was that all about? Luke folded his knife. I hate prophecies. What do you mean? His face twitched around the scar. Let's just say I messed things up for everybody else. The last 2 years, ever since my trip to the Garden of the Hesperides went sour, Chiron hasn't allowed any more quests. Annabeth's been dying to get out into the world. She pestered Chiron so much, he finally told her he already knew her fate. He'd had a prophecy from the Oracle. He wouldn't tell her the whole thing, but he said Annabeth wasn't destined to go on a quest yet. She had to wait until somebody special came to the camp. Somebody special? Don't worry about it, kid, Luke said. Annabeth wants to think everyone. Oh. Annabeth wants to think every new camper who comes through is the omen she's been waiting for. Now come on, it's dinner time. The moment he said it, a horn blew in the distance. Somehow, I knew it was a conch shell, even though I'd never heard one before. Luke yelled, 11, fall in. The whole cabin, about 20 of us, filed into the commons yard. We lined up in order of seniority, so, of course, I was dead last. Campers came from the other cabins, too, except for the 3 empty cabins at the end, and Cabin 8, which had looked normal in the daytime, but was now starting to glow silver as the sun went down. We marched up the hill to the mess hall pavilion. Satyrs joined us from the meadow. Naiads emerged from the canoeing lake. A few other girls came out of the woods. And when I say out of the woods, I mean straight out of the woods. I saw one girl, about 9 or 10 years old, melt from the side of a maple tree and come skipping up the hill. In all, there were maybe 100 campers, a few dozen satyrs, and a dozen assorted wood nymphs and naiads. At the pavilion, torches blazed around the marble columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each cabin had its own table covered in a white cloth trimmed in purple. 4 of the tables were empty, but cabin 11's was way overcrowded. I had to squeeze onto the edge of a bench with half my butt hanging off. I saw Grover sitting at table 12 with Mr. D, a few satyrs, and a couple of plump blonde boys who had looked just like Mr. D. Chiron stood to one side, the picnic table being way too small for a centaur. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of serious-looking athletic kids, all with her gray eyes and honey blonde hair. Clarice sat behind me at Aries' table. She'd apparently gotten over being hosed down because she was laughing and belching right alongside her friends. Finally, Chiron pounded his hoof against the marble floor of the pavilion, and everybody fell silent. He raised a glass. To the gods! Everybody else raised their glasses. To the gods! Wood nymphs came forward with platters of food. Grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, fresh cut bread, and yes, barbecue. My glass was empty, but Luke said, "Speak to it. Whatever you want. Non-alcoholic, of course." I said, "Cherry Coke." The glass filled with sparkling caramel liquid. Then I had an idea. Blue Cherry Coke. The soda turned a violent shade of cobalt. I took a cautious sip. Perfect. I drank a toast to my mother. She's not gone, I told myself. Not permanently, anyway. She's in the underworld. And if that's a real place, then someday... Here you go, Percy, Luke said, handing me a platter of smoked brisket. I loaded my plate and was about to take a big bite when I noticed everybody getting up, carrying their plates toward the fire in the center of the pavilion. Wondered if they were going for dessert or something. "Come on," Luke told me. As I got closer, I saw that everybody was taking a portion of their meal and dropping it into the fire. The ripest strawberry, the juiciest slice of beef, the warmest, most buttery roll. Luke murmured in my ear, "Burnt offerings for the gods. They like the smell." You're kidding. His look warned me not to take this lightly. But I couldn't help wondering why an immortal, all-powerful being would like the smell of burning food. Luke approached the fire, bowed his head, and tossed in a cluster of fat red grapes. Hermes. I was next. I wish I knew what God's name to say. Finally, I made a silent plea. Whoever you are, tell me, please. I scraped a big slice of brisket into the flames. When I caught a whiff of the smoke, I didn't gag. It smelled nothing like burning food. It smelled of hot chocolate and fresh-baked brownies, hamburgers on the grill and wildflowers, and 100 other good things that shouldn't have gone well together, but did. I could almost believe the gods could live off that smoke. When everybody had returned to their seats and finished eating their meals, Chiron pounded his hoof again for our attention. Mr. D got up with a huge sigh. "Yes, I suppose I'd better say hello to all you brats. Well, hello. Our activities director, Chiron, says the next Capture the Flag is Friday. Cabin 5 presently holds the laurels." A bunch of ugly cheering rose up from the Aries table. "Personally," Mr. D continued, "I couldn't care less, but congratulations. Also, I should tell you that we have a new camper today, Peter Johnson." Chiron murmured something. Percy Jackson," Mr. D corrected. "That's right, hurrah and all that. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on." Everybody cheered. We all headed down toward the amphitheater, where Apollo's cabin led a sing-along. We sang camp songs about the gods and ate s'mores and joked around. And the funny thing was, I didn't feel like anyone was staring at me anymore. I felt that I was home. Later in the evening, when the sparks from the campfire were curling into the starry sky, the conch horn blew again, and we all filed back to our cabins. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until I collapsed into my borrowed sleeping bag. My fingers curled around the Minotaur's horn. I thought about my mom, but I had good thoughts. Her smile, the bedtime stories she would read me when I was a kid, the way she would tell me not to let the bedbugs bite. When I closed my eyes, I fell asleep instantly. That was my first day at Camp Half-Blood. I wish I'd known how briefly I would get to enjoy my new home. Sorry, needed a water break. Hydrate, don't dehydrate, folks. Chapter 8. We capture a flag. The next few days, I settled into a routine that felt almost normal, if you don't count the fact that I was getting lessons from satyrs, nymphs, and a centaur. Alright. My hip could use a popping. Give me one moment.
Take your time, Amara.
Thank you for the check.
That one was from Raina.
Thank you so much, Raina. Each morning, I took ancient Greek from Annabeth, and we talked about the gods and goddesses in the present tense, which was kind of weird. I discovered that Annabeth was right about my dyslexia. Ancient Greek wasn't that hard for me to read. At least, no harder than English. After a couple of mornings, I could stumble through a few lines of Homer without too much headache. The rest of the day, I'd rotate through outdoor activities, looking for something I was good at. Chiron tried to teach me archery, but we found out pretty quick that I wasn't any good with a bow and arrow. He didn't complain, even when he had to desnag a stray arrow out of his tail. Foot racing? No good either. The wood nymph instructors left me in the dust. They told me not to worry about it. They'd had centuries of practice running away from lovesick gods. But still, it was a little humiliating to be slower than a tree. And wrestling? Forget it. Every time I got on the mat, Clarice would pulverize me. There's more where that came from, punk, she'd mumble in my ear. The only thing I really excelled at was canoeing, and that wasn't the kind of heroic skill people expected to see from the kid who had beaten the Minotaur. I knew the senior campers and counselors were watching me, trying to decide who my dad was, but they weren't having an easy time of it. I wasn't as strong as the Ares kids, or as good at archery as the Apollo kids. I didn't have Hephaestus' skill with metalwork, or, gods forbid, Dionysus' way with vine plants. Luke told me I might be a child of Hermes, a kind of jack of all trades, master of none. But I got the feeling he was just trying to make me feel better. He really didn't know what to make of me either. Despite all that, I liked camp. I got used to the morning fog over the beach, the smell of hot strawberry fields in the afternoon, even the weird noises of monsters in the woods at night. I would eat dinner with Cabin 11 and scrape part of my meal into the fire and try to feel some connection with my real dad. Nothing came. Just that warm feeling I'd always had, like the memory of his smile. I tried not to think too much about my mom, but I kept wondering, if gods and monsters were real, if all this magical stuff was possible, surely there was some way to save her, to bring her back. I started to understand Luke's bitterness and how he seemed to resent his father, Hermes. So, okay, maybe the gods had important things to do. But couldn't they call once in a while? Or thunder? Or something? Dionysus could make Diet Coke appear out of thin air. Why couldn't my dad, whoever he was, make a phone appear? Thursday afternoon, 3 days after I'd arrived at Camp Half-Blood, I had my first sword fighting lesson. Everybody from Cabin 11 gathered in the big circular arena, where Luke would be our instructor. We started with basic stabbing and slashing, using some straw-stuffed dummies in Greek armor. I guess I did okay. At least, I understood what I was supposed to do, and my reflexes were good. The problem was, I couldn't find a blade that felt right in my hands. Either they were too heavy, or too light, or too long. Luke tried his best to fix me up, but he agreed that none of the practice blades seemed to work for me. We moved on to dueling in pairs. Luke announced he would be my partner, since this was my first time. Good luck, one of the campers told me. Luke's the best swordsman in the last 300 years. Maybe he'll go easy on me? I said. The camper snorted. Luke showed me thrusts and parries and shield blocks. The hard way. With every swipe, I got a little more battered and bruised. "Keep your guard up, Percy," he'd say, then whap me in the ribs with the flat of his blade. "No, not that far up." Whap. Lunge. Whap. Now back. Whap. By the time he called a break, I was soaked in sweat. Everybody swarmed the drinks cooler. Luke poured ice water on his head, which looked like such a good idea. I did the same. Instantly, I felt better. Strength surged back into my arms. The sword didn't feel so awkward. "Okay, everybody, circle up," Luke ordered. "If Percy doesn't mind, I want to give you a little demo." Great, I thought. Let's all watch. Sorry. Let's all watch Percy get pounded. The Hermes guys gathered round. They were suppressing smiles. I figured they'd been in my shoes before, and couldn't wait to see how Luke used me for a punching bag. He told everybody he was going to demonstrate a disarming technique. How to twist the enemy's blade with the flat of your own sword that he had no choice but to drop his weapon. "This is difficult," he stressed. "I've had it used against me. No laughing at Percy now. Most swordsmen have to work years to master this technique." He demonstrated the move on me in slow motion. Sure enough, the sword clattered out of my hand. "Now in real time," he said after I'd retrieved my weapon. "We keep sparring until one of us pulls it off. Ready, Percy?" I nodded, and Luke came after me. Somehow, I kept him from getting a shot at the hilt of my sword. My senses opened up. I saw his attacks coming. I countered. I stepped forward and tried a thrust of my own. Luke deflected it easily, but I saw a change in his face. His eyes narrowed, and he started to press me with more force. The sword grew heavy in my hand. The balance wasn't right. I knew it was only a matter of seconds before Luke took me down. So I figured, what the heck? I tried the disarming maneuver. My blade hit the base of Luke's, and I twisted, putting my whole weight into a downward thrust. Clang! Luke's sword rattled against the stones. The tip of my blade was an inch from his undefended chest. The other campers were silent. I lowered my sword. Sorry? For a moment, Luke was too stunned to speak. Sorry? His scarred face broke into a grin. By the gods, Percy! Why are you sorry? Show me that again! I didn't want to. The short burst of manic energy had completely abandoned me. But Luke insisted. This time, there was no contest. The moment our swords connected, Luke hit my hilt and sent my weapon skidding across the floor. After a long pause, somebody in the audience suggested, "Beginner's luck?" Luke swiped the sweat off his brow. He appraised me with an entirely new interest. "Maybe," he said. "But I wonder what Percy could do with a balanced sword." Friday afternoon, I was sitting with Grover at the lake, resting from a near-death experience on the climbing wall. Grover had scampered to the top like a mountain goat, but the lava had almost gotten me. My shirt had smoking holes in it. The hairs had been singed off my forearm. We sat on the pier, watching the naiads do underwater basket weaving, until I got up the nerve to ask Grover how his conversation had gone with Mr. D. His face turned a sickly shade of yellow. "Fine," he said. "Just great." "So, your career's still on track?" He glanced at me nervously. "Chiron told you I want a searcher's license?" "Well, no." I had no idea what a searcher's license was, but it didn't seem like the right time to ask. "He just said you had big plans, and that you needed credit for completing a keeper's assignment. So, did you get it?" Grover looked down at the naiads. Mr. D suspended judgment. He said I hadn't failed or succeeded with you yet, so our fates were still tied together. If you got a quest and I went along to protect you, and we both came back alive, then maybe he'd consider the job complete. My spirits lifted. Well, that's not so bad, right? He might as well have transferred me to stable cleaning duty. Chances of you getting a quest. And even if you did, why would you want me along? Of course I'd want you along. Grover stared glumly into the water. Basket weaving. Must be nice to have a useful skill. I tried to reassure him that he had lots of talents, but that just made him look more miserable. We talked about canoeing and swordplay for a while, then debated the pros and cons of the different gods. Finally, I asked him about the 4 empty cabins. Number 8, the silver one, belongs to Artemis, he said. She vowed to be a maiden forever, so of course, no kids. The cabin is, honorary. If she didn't have one, she'd be mad. Yeah, okay. But what about the other 3? The ones at the end? Are those the big 3? Grover tensed. We were getting close to a touchy subject. No, one of them, number 2, is Hera's, he said. That's another honorary thing. She's the goddess of marriage, so of course she wouldn't go around having affairs with mortals. That's her husband's job. When we say the big 3, we mean the 3 powerful brothers, the sons of Kronos. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Right. After the great battle with the Titans, they took over the world from their dad and drew lots to decide who got what. Zeus the sky, I remembered. Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. Uh-huh. But Hades doesn't have a cabin here? No, he doesn't have a throne on Olympus either. He sort of does his own thing down in the underworld. If he did have a cabin here... Grover shuddered. Well, it wouldn't be pleasant. Let's leave it at that. But Zeus and Poseidon, they both had, like, a bazillion kids in the myths. Why are their cabins empty? Grover shifted his hooves uncomfortably. Well, about 60 years ago, after World War II, the Big 3 agreed they wouldn't sire any more heroes. Their children were just too powerful. They were affecting the course of human events too much, causing too much carnage. World War II, that was basically a fight between the sons of Zeus and Poseidon on one side, and the sons of Hades on the other. The winning side, Zeus and Poseidon, made Hades swear an oath with them. No more affairs with mortal women. They all swore on the river Styx. Thunder boomed. That's the most serious oath you can make. Grover nodded. And the brothers kept their word? No kids? Grover's face darkened. 17 years ago, Zeus fell off the wagon. There was this TV starlet with a big, fluffy 80s hairdo. He just couldn't help himself. When their child was born, a little girl named Talia, well, the river Styx is serious about promises. Zeus himself got off easy because he's immortal, but he brought a terrible fate on his daughter. But that isn't fair! It wasn't the little girl's fault. Grover hesitated. Percy, children of the Big Three have powers greater than other half-bloods. They have a strong aura, a scent that attracts monsters. When Hades found out about the girl, he wasn't too happy about Zeus breaking his oath. Hades let the worst monsters out of Tartarus to torment Talia. A satyr was assigned to be her keeper when she was 12, but there was nothing he could do. He tried to escort her here with a couple other half-bloods she'd befriended. They almost made it. They got all the way to the top of that hill. He pointed across the valley, to the pine tree where I'd fought the Minotaur. All 3 kindly ones were after them, along with a horde of hellhounds. They were about to be overrun when Talia told the satyr to take the other 2 half-bloods to safety while she held off the monsters. She was wounded and tired, and she didn't want to live like a hunted animal. The satyr didn't want to leave her, but he couldn't change her mind, and he had to protect the others. So Talia made her final stand alone, at the top of that hill. As she died, Zeus took pity on her. He turned her into that pine tree. Her spirit still helps protect the borders of the valley. That's why that hill is called Half-Blood Hill. I stared at the pine in the distance. The story made me feel hollow, and guilty too. A girl my age had sacrificed herself to save her friends. She had faced a whole army of monsters. Next to that, my victory over the Minotaur didn't seem like much. I wondered, if I had acted differently, could I have saved my mother? Grover, I asked, have heroes really gone on quests to the underworld? Sometimes, he shrugged. Orpheus, Hercules, Houdini. And have they ever returned somebody from the dead? No, never. Orpheus came close. Percy. You're not seriously thinking. No, I lied. I was just wondering. So, a satyr is always assigned to guard a demigod? Grover studied me tongue-tied. Grover studied me warily. I hadn't persuaded him that I'd really dropped the underworld idea. Not always. We go undercover to a lot of schools. We try to sniff out the half-bloods who have the makings of great heroes. If we find one with a very strong aura, like a child of the Big Three, we alert Chiron. He tries to keep an eye on them, since they could cause really huge problems. And you found me. Chiron said you thought I might be something special. Grover looked as if I'd just led him into a trap. I didn't... Oh, listen, don't think like that. If you were, you'd never, ever be allowed a quest, and I'd never get my license. You're probably a child of Hermes, or maybe even one of the minor gods, like Nemesis, the god of revenge. Ooh, ouch. Like Nemesis, the god of revenge. Don't worry, okay? I got the idea he was reassuring himself more than me. I'd never realized that. Ouch. That night, after dinner, there was a lot more excitement than usual. At last, it was time for Capture the Flag. When the plates were cleared away, the conch horn sounded, and we all stood at our table. Campers yelled and cheered as Annabeth and two of her siblings ran into the pavilion carrying a silk banner. It was about 10 feet long, glistening gray, with a painting of a barn owl above an olive tree. From the opposite side of the pavilion, Clarice and her buddies ran in with another banner of identical size, but a gaudy red painted with a bloody spear and a boar's head. I turned to Luke and yelled over the noise. "Those are the flags?" "Yeah." "Ares and Athena always lead the teams?" "Not always," he said, "but often." "So, if another cabin captures one, what do you do? Repaint the flag?" He grinned. "You'll see. First, we have to get one." "Whose side are we on?" He gave me a sly look, as if he knew something I didn't. The scar on his face made him look almost evil in the torchlight. "We've made a temporary alliance with Athena. Tonight, we get the flag from Ares, and you are going to help." The teams were announced. Athena had made an alliance with Apollo and Hermes, the two biggest cabins. Apparently, privileges had been traded. Shower times, chore schedules, the best slots for activities, to win support. Ares had allied themselves with everybody else: Dionysus, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus. From what I'd seen, Dionysus's kids were actually good athletes, but there were only two of them. Demeter's kids had the edge with nature skills and outdoor stuff, but they weren't very aggressive. Aphrodite's sons and daughters I wasn't too worried about. They mostly sat out every activity and checked their reflections in the lake and did their hair and gossiped. Hephaestus's kids weren't pretty, and there were only 4 of them, but they were big and burly from working in the metal shop all day. They might be a problem. That, of course, left Ares' cabin. A dozen of the biggest, ugliest, meanest kids on Long Island, or anywhere else on the planet. Chiron hammered his hoof on the marble. "Heroes," he announced. "You know the rules. The creek is the boundary line. The entire forest is fair game. All magic items are allowed. The banner must be prominently displayed and have no more than 2 guards. Prisoners may be disarmed, but may not be bound or gagged. No killing or maiming is allowed. I will serve as referee and battlefield medic. Arm yourselves." He spread his hands, and the tables were suddenly covered with equipment. Helmets, bronze swords, spears, oxide shields coated in metal. "Whoa," I said. "We're really supposed to use these?" Luke looked at me as if I were crazy. "Unless you want to get skewered by your friends in Cabin 5. Here, Chiron thought these would fit. You'll be on border patrol." Oof. My shield was the size of an NBA backboard, with a big caduceus in the middle. It weighed about 1,000,000 pounds. I could have snowboarded on it just fine, but I hope nobody seriously expected me to run fast. My helmet, like all the helmets on Athena's side, had a blue horsehair plume on top. Ares and their allies had red plumes. Annabeth yelled, "Blue team, forward!" We cheered and shook our swords and followed her down the path to the south woods. The red team yelled taunts at us as they headed off toward the north. I managed to catch up with Annabeth without tripping over my equipment. "Hey!" She kept marching. "So what's the plan?" I asked. "Got any magic items you can loan me?" Her hand drifted toward her pocket. Her hand drifted toward her pocket as if she were afraid I'd stolen something. "Just watch Clarice's spear," she said. "You don't want that thing touching you. Otherwise, don't worry. We'll take the banner from Ares. Has Luke given you your job yet?" "Border Patrol, whatever that means." "It's easy. Stand by the creek, keep the Reds away. Leave the rest to me. Athena always has a plan." She pushed ahead, leaving me in the dust. "Okay," I mumbled. "Glad you wanted me on your team." It was a warm, sticky night. The woods were dark, with fireflies popping in and out of view. Annabeth stationed me next to a little creek that gurgled over some rocks. Then she and the rest of the team scattered into the trees. Standing there alone, with my big blue feathered helmet and my huge shield, I felt like an idiot. The bronze sword, like all the swords I'd tried so far, seemed balanced wrong. The leather grip pulled on my hand like a bowling ball. There was no way anybody would actually attack me, would they? I mean, Olympus had to have liability issues, right? Far away, the conch horn blew. I heard whoops and yells in the woods, the clanking of metal, kids fighting. A blue-plumed ally from Apollo raced past me like a deer, leaped through the creek, and disappeared into enemy territory. Great, I thought. I'll miss all the fun, as usual. Then I heard a sound that sent a chill up my spine. A low, canine growl somewhere close by. I raised my shield instinctively. I had the feeling something was stalking me. Then the growling stopped. The presence retreated. On the other side of the creek, the underbrush exploded. 5 Ares warriors came yelling and screaming out of the dark. "Bring the punk!" Clarice screamed. Her ugly pig eyes glared through the slits of her helmet. She brandished a 5-foot-long spear, its barbed metal tip flickering with red light. Her siblings only had the standard-issue bronze swords. Not that that made me feel any better. They charged across the stream. There was no help in sight. I could run, or I could defend myself against half the Ares cabin. I managed to sidestep the first kid's swing, but these kids were not as stupid as the Minotaur. And they surrounded me, and Clarice thrust at me with her spear. My shield deflected the point, but I felt a painful tingling all over my body. My hair stood on end. My shield arm went numb, and the air burned. Electricity. her stupid spear was electric. I fell back. Another Ares guy slammed me in the chest with the butt of his sword, and I hit the dirt. They could have kicked me into jelly, but they were too busy laughing. "Give him a haircut," Clarice said. "Grab his hair." I managed to get to my feet. I raised my sword, but Clarice slammed it aside with her spear as sparks flew. Now both my arms were numb. "Oh, wow," Clarice said. "I'm totally scared of this guy. Terrified." "The flag is that way," I told her. I wanted to sound angry, but I was afraid it didn't come out that way. "Yeah," one of her siblings said. "But, see, we don't care about the flag. We care about a guy who made our cabin look stupid." "You do that without my help," I told them. Probably wasn't the smartest thing to say, but... Two of them came at me. I backed up toward the creek, tried to raise my shield, but Clarice was too fast. Her spear struck me straight in the ribs. If I hadn't been wearing an armored breastplate, I would have been shish kebabbed. As it was, the electric point just about shocked my teeth out of my mouth. Sorry? One of her cabin mates slashed his sword across my arms, leaving a good-sized cut. My own blood made me dizzy, warm and cold at the same time. "No maiming," I managed to say. "Oops," the guy said. "Guess I lost my dessert privilege." He pushed me into the creek, and I landed with a splash. They all laughed. I figured as soon as they were through being amused, I would die. Then something happened. The water seemed to wake up my senses, as if I'd just had a bag of my mom's double espresso jelly beans. Clarice and her cabin mates came into the creek to get me, but I stood to meet them. I knew what to do. I swung the flat of my sword against the first guy's head and knocked his helmet clean off. I hit him so hard I could see his eyes vibrating as he crumpled into the water. Ugly number 2 and ugly number 3 came at me. I slammed one in the face with my shield, and used my sword to shear off the other guy's horsehair plume. Both of them backed up quick. Ugly number 4 didn't look really anxious to attack, but Clarice kept coming, the point of her spear crackling with energy. As soon as she thrust, I caught the shaft between the edge of my shield and my sword, and I snapped it like a twig. She screamed, "You idiot! You corpse worm breath!" Damn it. Corpse breath worm. I'm not going to try to say that again. She probably would have said worse, but I smacked her between the eyes with my sword and sent her stumbling backward out of the creek. Then I heard yelling, elated screams, and I saw Luke running toward the boundary line with the red team's banner lifted high. He was flanked by a couple of Hermes guys covering his retreat, and a few Apollos behind them, fighting off the Hephaestus kids. The Ares folks got up, and Clarice muttered a dazed curse. "A trick!" she shouted. "It was a trick!" They staggered after Luke, but it was too late. Everybody converged on the creek as Luke ran into friendly territory. Our side exploded into cheers. The red banner shimmered and turned to silver. The boar and spear were replaced with a huge caduceus, the symbol of Cabin 11. Everybody on the blue team picked up Luke and started carrying him around on their shoulders. Chiron cantered out of the woods and blew the conch horn. The game was over. We'd won. I was about to join the celebration when Annabeth's voice, right next to me in the creek, said, "Not bad, hero." I looked, but she wasn't there. "Where the heck did you learn to fight like that?" she asked. The air shimmered, and she materialized, holding a Yankees ball cap as if she'd just taken it off her head. I felt myself getting angry. I wasn't even fazed by the fact that she'd just been invisible. "You set me up," I said. "You put me here because you knew Clarice would come after me, while you sent Luke around the flank. You had it all figured out." Annabeth shrugged. "I told you. Athena always has a plan." "Plan to get me pulverized?" "I came as fast as I could. I was about to jump in, but..." She shrugged. "You didn't need any help." Then she noticed my wounded arm. "How did you do that?" "Sword cut," I said. "What do you think?" "No. It was a sword cut. Look at it." The blood was gone. Where the huge cut had been, there was a long white scratch, and even that was fading. As I watched, it turned into a small scar and disappeared. I don't get it," I said. Annabeth was thinking hard. I could almost see the gears turning. She looked down at my feet, then at Clarice's broken spear, and said, "Step out of the water, Percy." "What?" "Just do it." I came out of the creek and immediately felt bone tired. My arms started to go numb again. My adrenaline rush left me. I almost fell over, but Annabeth steadied me. "Oh, sticks," she cursed. "This is not good. I assumed it would be Zeus." Before I could ask what she meant, I heard that canine growl again, but much closer than before. A howl ripped through the forest. The campers' cheering died instantly. Chiron shouted something in ancient Greek, which I would realize only later I had understood perfectly. "Stand ready, my bow." Annabeth drew her sword. There, on the rocks just above us, was a black hound the size of a rhino, with lava-red eyes and fangs like daggers. It was staring straight at me. Nobody moved except Annabeth, who yelled, "Percy, run!" She tried to step in front of me, but the hound was too fast. It leapt over her, an enormous shadow with teeth, and just as it hit me, I stumbled backward and felt its razor-sharp claws ripping through my armor. There was a cascade of thwacking sounds, like 40 pieces of paper being ripped one after the other. From the hound's neck sprouted a cluster of arrows. The monster fell dead at my feet. By some miracle, I was alive. I didn't want to look underneath the ruins of my shredded armor. My chest felt warm and wet, and I knew I was badly cut. Another second, and the monster would have turned me into 100 pounds of delicatessen meat. Chiron trotted up to us, a bow in his hand, his face grim. "De mortalis," Annabeth said. "That's a hellhound from the fields of punishment. They're not supposed to..." "Someone summoned it," Chiron said. "Someone inside the camp." Came over, the banner in his hand forgotten, his moment of glory gone. Clarice yelled, "It's all Percy's fault! Percy summoned it!" "Be quiet, child," Chiron told her. We watched the body of the hellhound melt into the shadow, soaking into the ground until it disappeared. "You're wounded," Annabeth told me. "Quick, Percy, get in the water." "I'm okay." "No, you're not," she said. "Chiron, watch this." I was too tired to argue. I stepped back into the creek, and the whole camp gathered round. Instantly, I felt better. I could feel the cuts on my chest closing up. Some of the campers gasped. "Look, I don't know why," I said, trying to apologize. "I'm sorry." But they weren't watching my wounds heal. They were staring at something above my head. "Percy?" Annabeth said, pointing. By the time I looked up, the sign was already fading, but I could still make out the hologram of green light, spinning and gleaming. A 3-tipped spear. A trident. "Your father," Annabeth murmured. "This is really not good." "It is determined," Chiron announced. All around me, campers started kneeling. Even the Ares cabin, though they didn't look happy about it. "My father?" I asked, completely bewildered. "Poseidon," said Chiron. "Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses. Hail, Perseus Jackson, son of the sea god." That's the end of that chapter.
You got a vibe check.
I see that.
You gotta go drink some of Poseidon real quick.
Actually, first I'm gonna take a Q-tip to my ear to scratch the inside.
I totally understand. Oh, and we've just started an epic, so it's like the perfect time for that. How are you feeling?
Well, that felt good.
How are you feeling, Amara?
I'm feeling pretty good.
Alright, just wanted to check in on you, because, I'm gonna go make something to eat in just a minute and do some dishes while you continue to read. But I wanted to make sure you were doing good first.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Alrighty. Then.
I
We'll
I
resume.
hate stumbling over words. I mixed up a few.
I could hear.
Clarice's insult there, the corpse breath worm.
Mm-hmm.
It really feels better to say corpse worm breath. It really does.
Yeah. But you know, we think
That's
of
not
things
what
in
the
tick
author
tock
wrote.
knock talk tick.
Yeah. Talk, tick, tock, tick.
That would drive somebody crazy if they're so used to hearing tick tock, hear something going talk tick.
Actually, I did that once. I I was in detention. And this one kid kept annoying me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started muttering talk tick under my breath. Yeah.
It's always beautiful when you get to cause a little bit of issues for some people.
I might have gotten another detention out of it, but
Was it worth
worth
it?
it.
Yeah, there you go. Alright, well, whenever you are ready to resume.
One more drink of water.
Yep.
Chapter 9. I am offered a quest. The next morning, Chiron moved me to cabin 3. I didn't have to share with anybody. I had plenty of room for all my stuff. The Minotaur's horn, one set of spare clothes, and a toiletry bag. I got to sit at my own dinner table, pick out all my own activities, call lights out whenever I felt like it, and not listen to anybody else. And I was absolutely miserable. Just when I'd started to feel accepted, to feel like I had a home in cabin 11 and might be a normal kid, or as normal as you can ever be when you're a half-blood, I'd been separated out as if I had some rare disease. Nobody mentioned the hellhound, but I got the feeling they were all talking about it behind my back. The attack had scared everybody. It sent 2 messages. One, that I was the son of the sea god, and 2, monsters would stop at nothing to kill me. They could even invade a camp that had always been considered safe. The other campers steered clear of me as much as possible. Cabin 11 was too nervous to have sword class with me after what I'd done to the Ares folks in the woods, so my lessons with Luke became one-on-one. He pushed me harder than ever, and wasn't afraid to bruise me up in the process. "You're going to need all the training you can get," he promised, as we were working with swords and flaming torches. "Now let's try that viper beheading strike again. 50 more repetitions." Annabeth still taught me Greek in the mornings, but she seemed distracted. Every time I said something, she scowled at me, as if I'd just poked her between the eyes. After lessons, she would walk away muttering to herself, "Quest? Poseidon? Dirty rotten. Gotta make a plan." Even Clarice kept her distance, though her venomous looks made it clear she wanted to kill me for breaking her magic spear. I wish she would just yell or punch me or something. I'd rather get into fights every day than be ignored. I knew somebody at camp resented me, because one night I came into my cabin and found a mortal newspaper dropped inside the doorway. A copy of the New York Daily News, opened to the Metro page. The article took me almost an hour to read, because the angrier I got, the more the words floated around on the page. "Boy and Mother Still Missing After Freak Car Accident" by Eileen Smith. Sally Jackson and son, Percy, are still missing 1 week after their mysterious disappearance. The family's badly burned 78 Camaro was discovered last Saturday on North Island Road, with the roof ripped off and the front axle broken. The car had flipped and skidded for several hundred feet before exploding. Mother and son had gone for a weekend vacation to Montauk, but left hastily, under mysterious circumstances. Small traces of blood were found in the car and near the scene of the wreck, but there were no other sign of the missing Jacksons. Residents in the rural area reported seeing nothing unusual around the time of the accident. Miss Jackson's husband, Gabe Bogliano, claims that his stepson, Percy Jackson, is a troubled child who has been kicked out of numerous boarding schools and has expressed violent tendencies in the past. Police would not say whether son Percy is a suspect in his mother's disappearance, but they have not ruled out foul play. Below are recent pictures of Sally Jackson and Percy. Police urge anyone with information to call the following toll-free Crime Stoppers hotline. Hey Django, welcome in! We're currently on the reading portion of the evening. I'm on Chapter 9 of Lightning Thief. Phone number was circled in black marker. I wadded up the paper and threw it away, then flopped down in my bunk bed in the middle of the empty cabin. Lights out, I told myself miserably. That night, I had my worst dream yet. I was running along the beach in a storm. This time, there was a city behind me. Not New York. The sprawl was different. Buildings spread further apart, palm trees and low hills in the distance. Sleep well, Jenga. About 100 yards from the surf, two men were fighting. They looked like TV wrestlers, muscular with beards and long hair. Both wore flowing Greek tunics, one trimmed in blue, the other in green. They grappled with each other, wrestled, kicked, and head-butted. And every time they connected, lightning flashed and the sky grew darker and the wind rose. I had to stop them. I didn't know why. But the harder I ran, the more the wind blew me back, until I was running in place, my heels digging uselessly in the sand. Over the roar of the storm, I could hear the blue-robed one yelling at the green-robed one. "Give it back! Give it back!" Like a kindergartner fighting over a toy. The waves got bigger, crashing into the beach, spraying me with salt. I yelled, "Stop it! Stop fighting!" The ground shook. Laughter came from somewhere underneath the earth, and a voice so deep and evil, it turned my blood to ice. "Come down, little hero," the voice crooned. "Come down." The sand split beneath me, opening up a crevice straight down to the center of the earth. My feet slipped, and darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up, sure I was falling. I was still in bed in cabin 3. My body told me it was morning, but it was dark outside, and thunder rolled across the hills. The storm was brewing. I hadn't dreamt that. Heard a clopping sound at the door, a hoof knocking on the threshold. "Come in?" Grover trotted inside, looking worried. "Mr. D wants to see you." "Why?" "He wants to kill... I'd better let him tell you." Nervously, I got dressed and followed, sure that I was in huge trouble. For days, I'd been half expecting a summons to the big house. Now that I was declared a son of Poseidon, one of the big 3 gods who weren't supposed to have kids, I figured it was a crime for me just to be alive. The other gods had probably been debating the best way to punish me for existing, and now Mr. D was ready to deliver their verdict. Over Long Island Sound, the sky looked like ink soup coming to a boil. A hazy curtain of rain was coming in our direction. I asked Grover if we needed an umbrella. No, he said. It never rains here unless we want it to. I pointed at the storm. What the heck is that, then? He glanced uneasily at the sky. It'll pass around us. Bad weather always does. I realized he was right. In the week I'd been here, I'd never seen any. In the week I'd been here, it'd never even been overcast. The few rain clouds I'd seen had skirted right around the edges of the valley. But this storm, this one was huge. At the volleyball pit, the kids from Apollo Cabin were playing a morning game against the satyrs. Dionysus's twins were walking around in the strawberry fields, making the plants grow. Everybody was going about their normal business, but they looked tense. They kept their eyes on the storm. Grover and I walked up to the front porch of the big house. Dionysus sat at the pinochle table in his tiger-striped Hawaiian shirt with his Diet Coke, just as he had on my first day. Chiron sat across the table in his fake wheelchair. They were playing against invisible opponents, 2 sets of cards hovering in the air. Well, well, Mr. D said without looking up. Our little celebrity. I waited. Come closer, Mr. D said. And don't expect me to kowtow to you, mortal, just because old Barnaclebeard is your father. A net of lightning flashed across the clouds. Thunder shook the windows of the house. Blah, 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 Dionysus said. Chiron feigned interest in his pinochle cards. Grover cowered by the railing, his hooves clopping back and forth. If I had my way, Dionysus said, I would cause your molecules to erupt in flames. We'd sweep up the ashes and be done with a lot of trouble. But Chiron seems to feel this would be against my mission at this cursed camp. To keep you little brats safe from harm. Spontaneous combustion is a form of harm, Mr. D, Chiron put in. Nonsense, Dionysus said. Boy wouldn't feel a thing. Nevertheless, I have agreed to restrain myself. I'm thinking of turning you into a dolphin instead, sending you back to your father. Mr. D, Chiron warned. Oh, all right, Dionysus relented. There's one more option, but it's deadly foolishness. Dionysus rose, and the invisible player's cards dropped to the table. I'm off to Olympus for the emergency meeting. The boy is still here when I get back. I'll turn him into an Atlantic bottlenose. Do you understand? And Perseus Jackson, if you're at all smart, you'll see that's a much more sensible choice than what Chiron feels you must do. Dionysus picked up a playing card, twisted it, and it became a plastic rectangle. A credit card? No, a security pass. He snapped his fingers. The air seemed to fold and bend around him. He became a hologram. Then a wind. Then he was gone, leaving only the smell of fresh pressed grapes lingering behind. Chiron smiled at me, but he looked tired and strained. Sit, Percy, please, and Grover. We did. Chiron laid his cards on the table, a winning hand he hadn't gotten to use. Tell me, Percy, he said, what did you make of the Hellhound? Just hearing the name made me shudder. Chiron probably wanted me to say, heck, it was nothing. I eat hellhounds for breakfast. But I didn't feel like lying. It scared me, I said. If you hadn't shot it, I'd be dead. You'll meet worse, Percy. Far worse before you're done. Done with what? Your quest, of course. Will you accept it? I glanced at Grover, who was crossing his fingers. Sir? Said. You haven't even told me what it is yet. Chiron grimaced. Well, that's the hard part. The details. Thunder rumbled across the valley. The storm clouds had now reached the edge of the beach. As far as I could see, the sky and the sea were boiling together. Poseidon and Zeus, I said. They're fighting over something valuable. Something that was stolen, aren't they? Chiron and Grover exchanged looks. Chiron sat forward in his wheelchair. How did you know that? My face felt hot. I wish I hadn't opened my big mouth. The weather since Christmas has been weird, like the sea and the sky are fighting. Then I talked to Annabeth and she'd overheard something about a theft. And I've also been having these dreams. I knew it, Grover said. Hush, Satyr, Chiron ordered. But it's his quest! Grover's eyes were bright with excitement. It must be! Only the Oracle can determine. Chiron stroked his bristly beard. Nevertheless, Percy, you are correct. Your father and Zeus are having their worst quarrel in centuries. They are fighting over something valuable that was stolen. To be precise, a lightning bolt. I laughed nervously. A what? Do not take this lightly, Chiron warned. I'm not talking about some tin foil covered zigzag you'll see in a second-grade play. I'm talking about a 2-foot-long cylinder of high-grade celestial bronze, capped on both ends with god-level explosives. Oh. Zeus's master bolt, Chiron said, getting worked up now. The symbol of his power, from which all other lightning bolts are patterned. The first weapon made by the Cyclopes for the war against the Titans. The bolts that sheared off the top of Mount Etna and hurled Kronos from his throne. The Master Bolt, which packs enough power to make mortal hydrogen bombs look like firecrackers. And it's missing? Stolen, Chiron said. By who? By whom? Chiron corrected. Once a teacher, always a teacher. By you. My mouth fell open. At least, Chiron held up a hand. That's what Zeus thinks. During the winter solstice, at the last council of the gods, Zeus and Poseidon had an argument. The usual nonsense. Mother Rhea always liked you best. Air disasters are more spectacular than sea disasters, etc. Afterward, Zeus realized his master bolt was missing, taken from the throne room under his very nose. He immediately blamed Poseidon. Now, a god cannot usurp another god's symbol of power directly. That is forbidden by the most ancient of divine laws. But Zeus believes your father convinced a human hero to take it. But I didn't. Patience and listen, child, Chiron said. Zeus has good reason to be suspicious. The forges of the Cyclopes are under the ocean, which gives Poseidon some influence over the makers of his brother's lightning. Zeus believes Poseidon has taken the Master Bolt, and is now secretly having the Cyclopes build an arsenal of illegal copies, which might be used to topple Zeus from his throne. The only thing Zeus wasn't sure about was which hero Poseidon used to steal the bolt. Now Poseidon has openly claimed you as his son. You were in New York over the winter holidays. You could easily have snuck onto Olympus. Zeus believes he has found his thief. I've never even been to Olympus. Zeus is crazy. Chiron and Grover glanced nervously at the sky. The clouds didn't seem to be parting around us, as Grover had promised. They were rolling straight over our valley, sealing us in like a coffin lid. Percy? Grover said. We don't use the C word to describe the Lord of the Sky. Perhaps paranoid, Chiron suggested. Then again, Poseidon has tried to unseat Zeus before. I believe that was question 38 on your final exam? He looked at me as if he actually expected me to remember question 38. How could anyone accuse me of stealing a god's weapon? I couldn't even steal a slice of pizza from Gabe's poker party without getting busted. Chiron was waiting for an answer. Something about a golden net? I guessed. Poseidon and Hera and a few other gods, they, trapped Zeus and wouldn't let him out until he promised to be a better ruler, right? Correct, Chiron said. And Zeus has never trusted Poseidon since. Of course, Poseidon denies stealing the Master Bolt. He took great offense at the accusation. The two have been arguing back and forth for months, threatening war. And now you've come along. The proverbial last straw. But I'm just a kid. Percy, Grover cut in. If you were Zeus, and you already thought your brother was plotting to overthrow you, and then your brother suddenly admitted he'd broken the sacred oath he took after World War II, that he's fathered a new mortal hero who might be used as a weapon against you, wouldn't that put a twist in your toga? But I didn't do anything. Poseidon, my dad, he didn't really have this Master Bolt stolen, did he? Chiron sighed. Most thinking observers would agree that thievery is not Poseidon's style. But the sea god is too proud to try convincing Zeus of that. Zeus has demanded that Poseidon return the bolt by the summer solstice. That's June 21st, 10 days from now. Poseidon wants an apology for being called a thief by the same date. I hoped that diplomacy might prevail, that Hera or Demeter, Hestia, would make the two brothers see sense. But your arrival has inflamed Zeus's temper. Now, neither god will back down. Unless someone intervenes. Unless the Master Bolt is found and returned to Zeus before the solstice, there will be war. And do you know what a full-fledged war would look like, Percy? Bad, I guessed. Imagine the world in chaos. Nature at war with itself. Olympians forced to choose sides between Zeus and Poseidon. Destruction. Carnage. Millions dead. Western civilization turned into a battleground so big it would make the Trojan War look like a water balloon fight. Bad, I repeated. And you, Percy Jackson, would be the first to feel Zeus's wrath. It started to rain. Volleyball players stopped their game and stared in stunned silence at the sky. I had brought this storm to Half-Blood Hill. Zeus was punishing the whole camp because of me. I was furious. So I have to find the stupid bolt, I said, and return it to Zeus. What better peace offering, Chiron said, than to have the son of Poseidon return Zeus's property? If Poseidon doesn't have it, where is the thing? I believe I know. Chiron's expression was grim. Part of a prophecy I had years ago. Well, some of the lines make sense to me now. But before I can say more, you must officially take up the quest. You must seek the counsel of the oracle. Why can't you tell me where the bolt is beforehand? Because if I did, you would be too afraid to accept the challenge. I swallowed. Good reason. You agree then? I looked at Grover, who nodded encouragingly. Easy for him. I was the one Zeus wanted to kill. All right, I said. Better than being turned into a dolphin. Then it is time you consulted the oracle, Chiron said. Go upstairs, Percy Jackson, to the attic. When you come back down, assuming you are still sane, we will talk more. Lights up. The stairs ended under a green trapdoor. I pulled the cord. The door swung down and a wooden ladder clattered into place. The warm air from above smelled like mildew and rotten wood, and something else. A smell I remembered from biology class. Reptiles. The smell of snakes. I held my breath and climbed. The attic was filled with Greek hero junk. Armor stands covered in cobwebs. Once bright shields pitted with rust. Old leather steamer trunks plastered with stickers saying Ithaca, Circe's Isle, and Land of the Amazons. One long table was stacked with glass jars filled with pickled things. Severed hairy claws, huge yellow eyes, and various other parts of monsters. A dusty mounted trophy on the wall looked like a giant snake's head, but with horns and a full set of shark's teeth. The plaque read, Hydra Head Number 1, Woodstock, New York, 1969. By the window, sitting on a wooden tripod stool, was the most gruesome memento of all. A mummy. Not the wrapped in cloth kind, but a human female body shriveled into a husk. She wore a tie-dyed sundress, lots of beaded necklaces, and a headband over long black hair. The skin of her face was thin and leathery over her skull, and her eyes were glassy white slits, as if the real eyes had been replaced by marbles. She'd been dead a long, long time. Looking at her sent chills up my back, and that was before she sat up on her stool and opened her mouth. A green mist poured from the mummy's mouth, coiling over the floor in thick tendrils, hissing like 20,000 snakes. I stumbled over myself, trying to get to the trap door, but it slammed shut. Inside my head, I heard a voice, slithering into one ear and coiling around my brain. I am the spirit of Delphi, speaker of the prophecies of Phoebus Apollo, slayer of the mighty Python. Approach, seeker, and ask. I wanted to say, no thanks, wrong door, just looking for the bathroom. But I forced myself to take a deep breath. The mummy wasn't alive. She was some kind of gruesome receptacle for something else. The power that was now swirling around me in the green mist. But its presence didn't feel evil, like my demonic math teacher Mrs. Dodds or the Minotaur. It felt more like the three fates I'd seen knitting the yarn outside the highway fruit stand. Ancient, powerful, and definitely not human. But not particularly interested in killing me either. I got up the courage to ask, what is my destiny? The mist swirled more thickly, collecting right in front of me and around the table with pickled monster part jars. Suddenly, there were 4 men sitting around the table, playing cards. Their faces became clear. It was Smelly Gabe and his buddies. My fists clenched, though I know this poker party couldn't be real. It was an illusion, made out of mist. Gabe turned toward me and spoke in the raspy voice of the oracle. You shall go west and face the god who is turned. His buddy on the right looked up and said in the same voice, You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. The guy on the left threw in 2 poker chips, then said, You shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend. Finally, Eddie, our building super, delivered the worst line of all. And you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. The figures began to dissolve. At first, I was too stunned to say anything. But as the mist retreated, coiling into a huge green serpent and slithering back into the mouth of the mummy, I cried, Wait! What do you mean? What friend? What will I fail to save? The tail of the mist snake disappeared into the mummy's mouth. She reclined back against the wall. Her mouth closed tight, as if it hadn't been open in 100 years. The attic was silent again, abandoned. Nothing but a room full of mementos. I got the feeling that I could stand here until I had cobwebs too, and I wouldn't learn anything else. My audience with the oracle was over. Well? Karen asked me. I slumped into a chair at the panoply table. She said I would retrieve what was stolen. Grover sat forward, chewing excitedly on the remains of a Diet Coke can. That's great! What did the oracle say exactly? Chiron pressed. This is important. My ears were still tingling from the reptilian voice. She said I would go west and face a god who has turned. I would retrieve what was stolen and see it safely return. I knew it, Grover said. Chiron didn't look satisfied. Anything else? I didn't want to tell him. What friend would betray me? I didn't have that many. And the last line. I would fail to save what mattered most. What kind of oracle would send me on a quest and tell me, oh, by the way, you'll fail? How could I confess that? No, I said. That's about it. He studied my face. Very well, Percy. But know this. The oracle's words often have double meanings. Don't dwell on them too much. The truth is not always clear until events come to pass. I got the feeling he knew I was holding back something bad, and he was trying to make me feel better. Okay, I said, anxious to change topics. So where do I go? Who's this god in the west? Ah, think, Percy, Chiron said. If Zeus and Poseidon weaken each other in war, who stands to gain? Somebody else who wants to take over? I guessed. Yes, quite. Someone who harbors a grudge, who's been quite unhappy with his lot since the world was divided aeons ago, whose kingdom would grow powerful with the deaths of millions. Someone who hates his brother for forcing him into an oath to have no more children. An oath that both of them have now broken. I thought about my dreams, the evil voice that had spoken from under the ground. Hades. Chiron nodded. The Lord of the Dead is the only possibility. A scrap of aluminum dribbled out of Grover's mouth. Whoa, wait. What? A Fury came after Percy, Chiron reminded him. She watched the young man until she was sure of his identity, then tried to kill him. Furies only obey one lord, Hades. Yes, but Hades hates all heroes. Especially if he has found out Percy is a son of Poseidon. A hellhound got into the forest, Chiron continued. Those can only be summoned from the fields of punishment, and it had to be summoned by someone within camp. Hades must have a spy here. He must suspect Poseidon will try to use Percy to clear his name. Hades would very much like to kill this young half-blood before he can take on the quest. Great, I muttered. That's 2 major gods who want to kill me. But a quest to... Grover swallowed. I mean, couldn't the Master Bolt be in some place like Maine? Maine's very nice this time of year. Hades sent a minion in to steal the Master Bolt, Chiron insisted. He hid it in the underworld, knowing full well that Zeus would blame Poseidon. I don't pretend to understand the Lord of the Dead's motives perfectly, or why he chose this time to start a war. But one thing is certain. Percy must go to the underworld, find the Master Bolt, and reveal the truth. A strange fire burned in my stomach. The weirdest thing was, it wasn't fear. It was anticipation, the desire for revenge. Hades had tried to kill me 3 times so far, with the Fury, the Minotaur, and the Hellhound. It was his fault my mother had disappeared in a flash of light. Now he was trying to frame me and my dad for a theft we hadn't committed. I was ready to take him on. Besides, if my mother was in the underworld... Whoa, boy, said the small part of my brain that was still sane. You're a kid. Hades is a god. Grover was trembling. He'd started eating Pinocchio cards like potato chips. The poor guy needed to complete a quest with me so he could get his searcher's license. Whatever that was. But how could I ask him to do this quest? Especially when the Oracle said I was destined to fail. This was suicide. Look, if we know it's Hades, I told Chiron, why can't we just tell the other gods? Zeus or Poseidon could go down to the underworld and bust some heads. Suspecting and knowing are not the same, Chiron said. Besides, even if the other gods suspect Hades, and I imagine Poseidon does, they couldn't retrieve the bolts themselves. Gods cannot cross each other's territories except by invitation. That is another ancient rule. Heroes, on the other hand, have certain privileges. They can go anywhere, challenge anyone, as long as they're bold enough and strong enough to do it. No god can be held responsible for a hero's actions. Why do you think the gods always operate through humans? You're saying I'm being used. I'm saying it's no accident Poseidon has claimed you now. It is a risky gamble, but he's in a desperate situation. He needs you. My dad needs me. Emotions rolled inside me like bits of glass in a kaleidoscope. I didn't know whether to feel resentful or grateful, happy or angry. Poseidon had ignored me for 12 years. Now suddenly, he needed me. I looked at Chiron. You've known I was Poseidon's son all along, haven't you? I've had my suspicions. As I've said, I've spoken to the Oracle too. I got the feeling there was a lot he wasn't telling me about his prophecy, but I decided I couldn't worry about that right now. After all, I was holding back information too. So let me get this straight, I said. I'm supposed to go to the underworld and confront the Lord of the Dead. Check, Chiron said. Find the most powerful weapon in the universe. Check. And get back to Olympus before the summer solstice in 10 days. That's about right. I looked at Grover, who gulped down the ace of hearts. Did I mention that Maine is very nice this time of year? He asked weakly. You don't have to go, I told him. I can't ask that of you. Oh, he shifted his hooves. No, it's just that satyrs in underground places, well... He took a deep breath, then stood, brushing the shredded cards and aluminum bits off of his t-shirt. You saved my life, Percy. If you're serious about wanting me along, I won't let you down. I felt so relieved I wanted to cry, though I didn't think that would be very heroic. Grover was the only friend I'd ever had for longer than a few months. I wasn't sure what good a satyr could do against the forces of the dead, but I felt better knowing he'd be with me. All the way, G-Man. I turned to Chiron. So where do we go? The Oracle just said to go west. The entrance to the underworld is always in the west. It moves from age to age, just like Olympus. Right now, of course, it's in America. Where? I asked. Chiron looked surprised. I thought that would be obvious enough. The entrance to the underworld is in Los Angeles. Oh, I said. Naturally. So we just get on a plane. No! Grover shrieked. Percy, what are you thinking? Have you ever been on a plane in your life? I shook my head, feeling embarrassed. My mom had never taken me anywhere by plane. She'd always said we didn't have the money. Besides, her parents died in a plane crash. Percy, think, Chiron said. You are the son of the sea god. Your father's bitterest rival is Zeus, lord of the sky. Your mother knew better than to trust you in an airplane. You would be in Zeus's domain. You would never come down alive. Overhead, lightning crackled. Thunder boomed. Okay, I said, determined not to look at the storm. So I'll travel over land. That's right, Chiron said. 2 companions may accompany you. Grover is one. The other has already volunteered, if you will accept her help. Gee, I said, feigning surprise. Who else would be stupid enough to volunteer for a quest like this? The air shimmered behind Chiron. Annabeth became visible, stuffing her Yankees cap into her back pocket. I've been waiting a long time for a quest, Seaweed Brain, she said. Athena is no fan of Poseidon, but if you're going to save the world, I'm the best person to keep you from messing up. If you do say so yourself, I said. I suppose you have a plan, wise girl? Her cheeks colored. Do you want my help or not? Truth was, I did. I needed all the help I could get. A trio, I said. That will work. Excellent, Chiron said. This afternoon we can take you as far as the bus terminal in Manhattan. After that, you are on your own. Lightning flashed. Rain poured down on the meadows that were never supposed to have violent weather. No time to waste, Chiron said. I think you should all get packing. Oof, sorry. And that is the end of that chapter. My yawns are becoming more frequent.
So it sounds like you should probably wrap up and head to bed then. If you're
That's
getting
sad.
tired too.
It's not necessarily that I'm getting tired. Yawns are more of an effect of not getting enough oxygen. The more I talk, the more I yawn. I
know.
forget to breathe.
I know
So
sometimes yawning can be an effect of being tired as well. A
You
way
breathe
of getting the
less when
body
you're
to
tired.
get the body to relax.
Yeah. I know I'm not hitting the tired stage yet, but I'm probably at the point where I shouldn't be reading much more.
Alright. Well then we can wrap it up here for tonight. So let me see if there's
Next
anybody
week we
online.
start chapter 10.
Chapter 10? Alright, let me see if there's anybody online that we can go pester and raid.
Have you made a decision on games later?
I'm not going to be playing games later tonight. I'm going to be working with Nil, but for some behind the scenes stuff.
Okay.
I will say this. When I started up stream, I got an email to the business email for, that I set up that's kind of hidden on the Twitch page.
Mm-hmm.
With an anonymous email saying, here's a Steam key.
A Steam what?
A Steam key. It's a key that you can put in to activate a product on Steam. That someone could email you, give you a gift, etc. Right?
Nice.
They sent me the new Armored Core. So.
Oh my god.
And there's no way to contact them. It's an anonymous thing, and when I tried to email them back, it just said cannot be contacted. So I'm sitting here going, anonymous soul, you are a absolute treat.
Oh. Alright, so did you want to do a shout out here to say thanks?
I don't have a name.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so I've already shouted them out on Twitter.
Okay.
Just to whatever anonymous soul who did it. And, yeah. But
that is damned nice of them.
I'm just surprised it was me and not, someone like Nell, someone like Alma, someone who's much larger than our little community here.
I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. It's nice. But with that, I think we're gonna close up shop for tonight. I gotta go talk with Nell about some stuff, and it's probably a good time for everybody to start winding up and going to bed.
All right.
Yeah.
I hope everyone enjoyed.
With nobody online, I think it's probably best just to go to
Jeez.
close up.
Yeah.
So, have a good night, everybody.
Y'all have fun.